It is Monday, December the 21st, and that means, of course, it is time for my news radar. So let's start off the news with something slightly disappointing, but I don't think super surprising. I told you guys on Twitter maybe a week and a half ago that it looked as though the December update for the Surface Duo was being delayed, maybe to expect it a couple of weeks later than usual. In the past, since we got this thing in September, they've been pretty good about hitting us with those updates early on in the month. We had one for October and November, pretty much right on time. But of course, the day we expected the December update came and went, well, unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit longer even than that. We're seeing reported from several different sources like Windows Central, Daniel Rubino, and so forth, that the December update will not actually be hitting in December. Expect to get that update closer to the first of the year. And that's where things actually start to get a little bit interesting, because we're getting closer and closer to when the expected launch for Android 11 was meant to be. And of course, Android 11 is supposed to have all sorts of great optimizations for dual screen and folding screen devices. So hopefully Android 11 will make a really big difference for the Surface Duo in terms of performance and stability. And the further we push the December update back, well, there's supposed to be a January update as well. Maybe these two updates get rolled into one bigger update once the bug that was found in the December update, which caused it to be pushed back, gets fully squashed. The last thing we need is to bring more bugs to the Surface Duo. I think these last couple of launcher updates have been pretty not great for me so far. So hopefully we can get some of these things cleaned up and a big good update coming early 2021. And then, the word I'm hearing is that Android 11 expected sometime in the first quarter of 2021 as well. So let's stick with smartphones here for just a minute longer. One of the more interesting phones coming out in the very near future is Samsung's S21 series. In addition to having a pretty big overhaul in terms of the appearance of the device, the two things that are really exciting to me are the processors that will be available in those two different variants of that phone, or of those phones, because it's a series of phones. You've got several of the S21. So obviously you're going to get a Snapdragon 888 version, but you're also going to get a version with their new Exynos 2100. And it's getting really interesting because the rumors are pointing towards the Exynos 2100 actually being a faster system on a chip than the Snapdragon 888. Now, there's more things to life than just raw power, but at any rate, it's looking really interesting as we are getting more and more leaks out there and actual just, postings of the performance. So we have Geekbench scores directly from Qualcomm showing the Snapdragon 888 scoring in the 1100 single core and 3800 multi-core range. Those are very, very impressive results. Now, this guy, Ice Universe, who is a pretty reputable leaker on the internet, is saying that he can expect Exynos 2100 to be closer to 4,000 in terms of multi-core. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any leaks or benchmarks that really back that up yet, because what we are seeing is benchmarks showing the Exynos 2100 score going up and up and up as it approaches that 4,000 mark, but we haven't seen it fully optimized, fully running at its highest potential just yet. But he does still think it's going to get to 4,000, which is really, really impressive. Now, when we're talking about impressive things the S21 is going to be able to do, I would be remiss if I did not show you this. This is a tweet basically saying, it says, okay, so my sources gave me two moon pictures. One is the Exynos 2100 Ultra that my source is using. Another is the Exynos Note 20 Ultra. Even with Twitter compression, you can tell the difference between them both. Both pic are handheld at 50 times, by the way. So this image here is purported to have been taken on an Exynos 2100 S21 Ultra. That is obviously the moon. That is pretty freaking incredible. The sharpness, the clarity is really, really impressive. And then this is apparently a Note 20 Ultra using the Exynos processor. One of the coolest things that some of these phone makers have been doing lately is instituting that periscope style telephoto lens. And obviously Samsung is pushing that to an even greater length here pun very much intended. One of the things I had noticed in the past with the Exynos processors when comparing them to the Snapdragon processors was that the same camera, the same sensor, the same photo would look worse on the Exynos processor. It's one of the things that the image pipeline was just simply worse on the Exynos version of the Samsung Galaxy line of phones. Hopefully the Exynos 2100 can take a big step forward, not just in performance, but in that image pipeline and get that image quality up closer or equivalent to where the Snapdragon has it already. So let's switch gears for a minute and talk about Microsoft. So obviously we've talked a million times already about Apple's M1 processor, their foray into ARM computing, and we've talked about what the M1 looks like in comparison to the SQ2, which is basically a modified ever so slightly version of the Snapdragon 855 mobile system on a chip that is what is powering the Surface Pro X. And look, the comparison is not great. A lot of people in the comments have said, well, yeah, but that's, comparing apples and oranges because the SQ2 is basically a mobile chip and the M1 is a full desktop class ARM system on a chip. And yeah, that's the point though, right? My point all along was not that one was just more powerful than the other. My point has been that Apple made their own chip and they made a really, really good chip. They took it very, very seriously, and Microsoft didn't. They took an already existent system on a chip for a phone, tweaked it a bit, and called it a day. That's the point. What Microsoft might need to do is to make their own chips like Apple in order to compete, and it appears as though that may be exactly what they are doing. If we look at this article from Windows Central, and they are referencing an article from Forbes, it says Microsoft reportedly creating its own ARM chips for servers and for Surface PC. To give some background here, we do have a quote from Panos Panay saying, where we think we need to invest in silicon, we are absolutely going to do it. If there's a need, we're going to fill it. This was tweeted by Daniel Rubino. So this is not outside the realm of possibility here. But what Bloomberg is saying is Microsoft's efforts are more likely to result in a server chip than one for its Surface devices, though the latter is possible, said one of the people. The company's chip design unit reports to Jason Zander, head of the Azure cloud business, rather than Panos Panay, who oversees Surface products. So one of the big things Microsoft does is run their cloud platform, Azure, and they run these things on these big server towers. And if they were able to switch these things from x86 to ARM, a huge thing would happen for them. They would use way less power to run these servers and a lot less heat would be generated. So this makes a lot of sense for them to be working on. But I think where things get really interesting for most of us is where it says the article mentions that Microsoft is exploring using another chip in some of its Surface line of personal computers. And I genuinely hope that this is something that they've been thinking about for quite some time, and this isn't something that they thought the Surface Pro X was really good, and then the M1 came out and they were like, oh my god, it's not, we have to do something different. I'm really hopeful that this has been an ongoing process, that the SQ2 was them dipping their toes in the water, but they were planning on doing something much bigger in the long run anyways, because if they weren't, they're even further behind than it appears they might be. Now, when Microsoft was reached out to respond to this rumor, they said, quote, because silicon is a foundational building block for technology, we're continuing to invest in our own capabilities in areas like design, manufacturing, and tools, while also fostering and strengthening partnerships with a wide range of chip providers. That is not a denial in any way, shape, or form. That's just basically like, hey, are you guys making your own ARM chips? And they're like, we're working on all kinds of stuff. That's not a yes, that's not a no, but it's a yes. Now, a really big distinction here is that Microsoft has worked collaboratively with other chip makers to customize things like the chip that's in the Xbox or in the Surface Pro X, whereas Apple has been making from the ground up their own chips for a very long time. So I don't think they can catch up to Apple super, super quickly. But if they could work with Intel or even with AMD, because there are rumors now that AMD is working on an ARM chip as well, if they could work with one of these people and really take this super seriously and do something like Apple's done in a partnership, I think they could make a really big difference really, really quickly. I cannot wait to see what a Surface Pro X SQ2 would look like running an ARM chip that is, 3-4 times more powerful than the SQ2, something that gets them inching closer to the M1's performance. What do you guys think about Microsoft making their own ARM chips? How important do you think this is for the future, especially considering that they're, working on Windows 10X for low power devices, for the Chromebook market, and for future devices? Do you think ARM is a big piece of Microsoft's future? What do you guys think? So guys, that is all the news I have for you on this one. Be sure to check back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for my next edition of News Radar. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends. If you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a Scary If Literal member. You'll get access to a whole bunch of emoticons to use with live streams and a shout out on an upcoming video. Thanks as always for your continued support.